Saturday, September 27, 2025, the number 17 Alabama head to Athens, Georgia to take on the number 5 Georgia Bulldogs. And Georgia is favored in this game by 2.5 points. It is at Sanford Stadium in Athens, Georgia. There is a chance of rain in the game, but this is going to be electric. If I would have told you a year ago, 2 years ago, that Alabama and Georgia would be playing on the same weekend as Oregon and Penn State, and number one, Oregon Penn State would have the higher ranked game, and game day would be there instead of that, you would not have believed me. But we got a lot to talk about because this game is still an electric matchup. I'm George Wrighster, former NFL player, college football analyst for the CW, and here on George Wrighster's College Football Podcast. We are going to start this breakdown like we always do. Coach versus coach. Kalen DeBoer versus national championship winning two-time Kirby Smart. So in this game, Kalen DeBoer is 1-0 versus Georgia. And Georgia is 1-7 versus Alabama since 2015. And Georgia has lost the last 7 games against Bama in the state of Georgia. And they've been in Athens, and some of them have been in Atlanta. But either way, it is still a home game, essentially, for the Bulldogs. And Georgia fans know that they have an elite coach in Kirby Smart. Now, most non-Georgia fans, they would probably acknowledge that Kirby Smart, that he is the top coach in the country right now. And as good as Kalen DeBoer has been in the brief history in the FBS level, he's just not on the level of Kirby Smart in terms of his proven ability, because he hasn't had the same resume and opportunity, but still the same ability to recruit, navigate the SEC, and not repeatedly fall into the trap of playing to the level of his competition. But I also believe that most Georgia fans agree that there is some kind of mental block here that has kept Georgia from overtaking Alabama, because the national championship win in 2021, that should have been that moment. But then in 2023 and 2024, with arguably superior talent, Georgia took losses to Alabama in the SEC championship game in what became Nick Saban's last go at this rivalry. Now, last year, this game was in Tuscaloosa, and in Kalen DeBoer's SEC debut, Alabama had stormed out to a 30-7 halftime lead before going on to win 41-34. Now, try putting yourself into the shoes of Alabama fans for the first 15 minutes of that halftime, where the Crimson Tide were beating Georgia by 3+ touchdowns. And then you just came out of the era where the greatest coach of all time, Nick Saban, and it had to feel like the future was as bright as it has ever been. But here we are, just 1 year later, and you've gone 7-5 since that win over Georgia, and 5-5 against Power 4 competition. Now, that begs the question, and it makes you wonder, which coach is under the greatest amount of pressure going into this game? Because if Georgia loses this game, you just get further entrenched into the narrative that Alabama is the big brother, and that you will always have to, get stuffed in a locker, regardless of year-to-year context and whether you win the national championship or not. It's like Ohio State and Michigan right now. Michigan is stuffing Ohio State in the locker, but Ohio State just won a national championship. So how do you really feel about it? If that happens, it'll be another year of people starting the conversation with sentences with, Kirby Smart is great, but the question is, if Kalen DeBoer can't get this game done, then they actually might start the process of finding somebody who can get it done. And that's not something that Kirby Smart has to worry about at all, because he ain't in danger, not even a little bit. So maybe the greatest amount of pressure is really on Alabama's end in this game. Now we got to look at the quarterbacks, right? Ty Simpson on one hand, and then on the other hand, you have a man in Gunnar Stockton who was very highly rated coming out of high school as well. Now, Ty Simpson for Alabama, he's now thrown 139 college passes without an interception. Now, whatever adjustments that Ryan Grubb made, their offensive coordinator, that he made after the Florida State loss, has put Ty Simpson in a position to be damn near perfect. Because in his last 2 games, the kid is 41 for 46, 7 touchdowns, 13 yards per attempt, and he has a rushing touchdown as well. And against Wisconsin, he didn't even have the benefit of a running game to support him. And that game was literally on his arm, and he came through. Now, on the other side of things, you got Gunnar Stockton, because he beat Tennessee on the road. And you can't talk about that game without talking about his 300 yards and 3 total touchdowns. And when Georgia was down 38-30 with under 3 minutes left, Stockton, he didn't flinch. One of the most memorable throws probably in Georgia football history was when he hit London Humphreys and Zachariah Branch for the touchdown and 2-point conversion, because that one to Humphreys was on 4th down. Game would have been over if he misses that, and he threw an absolute dot. It was amazing. Now, both of these quarterbacks, though, they have been meeting the moment so far. And this game is going to go a long way in shaping their legacies at their respective schools. Just ask Carson Beck. Because I will tell you right now, if either Simpson or Gunnar Stockton, if they have a solid game in a win, they are shooting right to the top of the Heisman rankings. You can absolutely ensure that. Alabama's offense versus Georgia's defense. Because last year, Alabama jumped all over Georgia. They had short passes, set up Jalen Milroe to be a menace as a runner. And that is not going to be what happened last year, because Ty Simpson isn't that type of dynamic and powerful athlete. But those quick passes to set up 2nd and 3rd and shorts are going to be super important, and likely the same things that you see. Because this is the exact type of offense to try to get 7 or 8 yard gains to Ryan Williams on 1st down. And then take a deep shot on 2nd down, and then keep all that same personnel on the field and potentially run for the 1st down on 3rd down if they don't nail on the deep shot. Now, Georgia, their defense, they can stifle a lot of what Ryan Grubb likes to do by being aggressive on 1st down. And maybe some press coverage, sell out on blitz, try to force a 2nd down and long. Because at the same time, that is a little bit risky. But you cannot let Kalen DeBoer, Ryan Grubb, and this offense set the tone. You have to bring the fight to them. And even though that Georgia was able to come back on Tennessee, you don't want to make that a habit, falling into a hole and having to come back, because you only get so many lives, man. And if I am Kirby Smart and I win the toss in this game, I'm taking the football right away, and not out of fear. It's just smart to limit Alabama's early opportunities, because if you can jump up on them, then all of a sudden that doubt can creep in. Oh, Kalen DeBoer, boo birds. People starting to think things in their mind if you can jump on them early. And we've seen that Alabama, how they look when they get in a groove right in the beginning of the game. And we've also seen what happens when they don't. Look no further than the Oklahoma game last year and the Florida State game this year. Now, on Alabama's end, one of their star wide receivers, the other one outside of Ryan Williams, is Jeremy Bernard. Now, he is just as important for Georgia's defense to contain as Ryan Williams is. And then their running back, Jam Miller, the kid is expected to be back from injury. But the question is he going to be getting 20 touches first thing after healing from a collarbone? Probably not. You have C.J. Allen and Raylen Wilson. They are dependable linebackers. And as long as they do their job to fill gaps to limit explosive runs, this game is really going to come down to how Georgia's defensive backs, how they handle themselves against a talented group of wide receivers, and if their defensive line can get pressure on Ty Simpson. Now let's look at Georgia's offense versus Alabama's defense. Alabama got drugged through the absolute mud after that Florida State loss. And you had video breakdowns calling for Kalen DeBoer's job on the basis of Bray Hubbard's play alone. Well, 2 weeks later, Hubbard leads the team in solo tackles and interceptions. So maybe it was just a bad game, or maybe it was the wake-up call that they needed, or maybe Alabama has not played, competition comparable to them since. But one thing is for sure, that Georgia is going to go about things differently. They are going to go about things much differently than they did to start the game last year, because they seemed confused about what their offensive identity was going to be headed into SEC play last year. And they basically threw until there was a mistake, and then ran until there was a mistake, and then switched back and forth until things started coming together. Having already won on the road in Knoxville, and then having those early game jitters that allowed the Vols to build the lead, maybe that's out of their system, because their defense allowed way too many points, over 40 points. Or maybe The question is that then indicative of who Georgia is with Mike Bobo calling the plays? Because last year, the Bulldogs were tied for 119th with the University of Houston with just 3.2 first quarter points per game. That ain't gonna cut it, fam. Now, meanwhile, the Bulldogs were 36th in the second quarter in points per game and 5th in the third quarter in points per game. So Mike Bobo is like artificial intelligence. He learns as he goes. But I'm sure Georgia fans that they wouldn't mind a good scripted start every now and then instead of having to adjust and machine learn this thing. Now, on Alabama side, though, they seem like a team that can match up physically up front on paper, but they can also be physically dominated like we saw in that Florida State game. And that could spell trouble in short yardage situations when Gunnar Stockton, when he can use his legs, or Nate Frazier can move the chains with a 3 to 4 yard drive. Now, Alabama, they need their defensive line, James Smith, to dominate up front and create some negative plays to keep the rest of the Tide off of their heels and force Gunnar Stockton to try and win this game with his arm. Kind of like he did last week. But you would rather risk that than be on your heels and getting run over, because that is going to be talked about. What are the X factors in this game? Because for Alabama, Ryan Williams, he has not been healthy all year, and they need him to show up big in this game. And Daniel Harris, Dalen Everett, they are two experienced and skilled corners who are going to be playing on Sundays. But Ryan Williams isn't supposed to be eventually just playing on Sundays. He's supposed to be a guy that resets the wide receiver market with his second contract someday. Because 17-year-old Ryan, he's 18 years old right now. Now, the one time Alabama that they didn't win this game in the last 11 years, Jamison Williams was just average. Brian Robinson Jr., he never got loose. And Bryce Young had his only multi-interception game of that season. So sometimes the X factor in the game is a hidden gem of a player or an unheralded guy already. But just in case you need your stars to be stars in these games, you absolutely have to have that happen. And if you want to keep Alabama's dominance over Georgia intact, then your stars are going to have to be stars. But the X factor for Georgia, when the defensive line is disruptive, championships are possible. Now, this year, the position group that everybody was worried about the most has 0 sacks and just a couple of tackles for loss. So that is concerning. But Christian Miller, he needs to show up against Alabama's center. Parker Brailsford, Gabe Harris needs to get back to forcing fumbles for this Georgia defense. And you got Jordan Hall. He needs to make running up the middle an absolute chore for Bama, because everything starts and ends with this unit for Georgia, and it is a tall task to expect them to start performing up to their potential against Alabama, but we shall see. Georgia is favored by 2.5 points in this game. Georgia is at home. I am taking the Georgia Bulldogs -2.5. And I'm George Wrighster. Make sure that you like, subscribe, get notifications, and tell a friend about the show. Peace out. Catch you guys later.